Hello and welcome to Craftsy Live, where we are talking about growing your own food in small spaces. My name is Lilia and I'll be your moderator today. A few housekeeping items before we get started. If you scroll underneath the video here, you'll see an orange chat. So please leave any questions or comments you have for us. Say hi, say where you're from, and we'll acknowledge those. And underneath the chat, there is a little link you can click to download a DIY vegetable gardening and planter plans bundle. So you'll get 2 plans for creating your own planters, and you'll get lots of tips on what to plant in them. But I am joined with Emily Clemmie today, who is a vegetable gardener extraordinaire. So please tell us a little bit about yourself and your vegetable gardening journey.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
So my name's Emily Clemmie, and I am mom to 2 boys, 3 and 5 years old. Hi, Wesley and Brody. I have 2 dogs, 3 cats, and some number of chickens at my house.
Super busy besides all the vegetables. You got a lot of other things going on too.
It really is. So we live in a suburb of Minneapolis, Minnesota in hardiness zone 4B for those of you who are around the country. Although that may have changed this year with how the weather's been. I believe the hardiness zones have changed a bit, so keep an eye on that if you're in the gardening world. So I got started gardening in 2020. We moved to a house in the middle of the pandemic.
Okay.
That had...
You acquired more space.
Yes.
Yep.
A very large garden, or a smallish, a biggish garden. And it kind of came with the house, and I knew next to nothing about gardening at this point, and decided to give it a shot for the kids, and it ended up doing pretty well. That year I grew everything from seed, and I didn't know a single thing about it, so I ended up having to buy all new plants, but we fell in love with gardening and growing our own food that year. So my son Wesley was able to pick and eat his own food out in the garden, which was really fun. The second year I got serious and built a fence around the garden to try to keep out some bunnies and keep the dogs out, and added new beds. And then the third year I added even more beds and tried starting everything from seed again. And it worked so well. I had tons and tons of extra seedlings. So I had my first veggie seedling sale just outside my house. And then the fourth year we expanded the garden by over double. Added a huge chicken coop and run, as well as some compost bins, and added more permanent greenhouse inside the house. And then this year I started over 150 varieties of veggie seedlings for my sale that we had earlier this month in Robbinsdale at Nouvelle Brewing. And it went great. I got to meet a ton of people from the gardening community, got to talk tips and tricks with all of them, and then I planted all of my veggies in my garden. So it ended up being a very, very successful start to gardening season.
Yeah, a huge journey. And did you build the planters and your raised garden beds yourself?
Yep. So all of the raised beds I have, what we started with, I just kind of expanded on that and then replaced beds as needed. Very, very easy to do. You don't need a ton of space. You don't need a ton of wood. You don't need anything special to do it. I just used 2x6s and nailed them together, and they work great. You can even just grow food right in the ground. Yeah. People have been doing it for years all over the world.
Yeah, and if you want to make your own raised garden bed, that is in the bundle that you can download below, along with a DIY pallet planter that you can plant lettuce in, and some plants from our friends at Woodworkers Guild of America for smaller planters as well. So that's what we got in there. Please take us more on your gardening journey, and tell us a little bit about what square foot gardening is.
So square foot gardening is essentially packing your plants really close in using a square foot grid, basically.
Utilizing the space.
Yep,
really.
Yep. You're just trying to more efficiently use your space to grow, and you can grow quite a bit. So basically, in 1 square foot grid, you can grow 1 tomato plant, you can grow 1 pepper plant, but smaller varieties like herbs, cucumbers, carrots, you can have more than 1 planted per grid. So some of the things you need to make sure you're aware of when you're doing this sort of thing is you need to make sure you have very healthy soil. You need to be feeding it regularly with compost, natural fertilizers, worm castings. Basically, the nutrients from the plant have to come from somewhere, and as your plants are growing, they're taking nutrients. So you need to be feeding your soil periodically, especially with square foot gardening. Larger plants can shade smaller plants, which is helpful in some cases like lettuces, but less beneficial in others. So you need to make sure wherever you're planting, you're aware of where the sun is going to hit and what plants are going to shade other plants. And then as you're growing many plants in a smaller space, you need to make sure you're pruning your plants for better airflow. And that could be pruning the suckers off tomatoes, that could be pruning the suckers off cucumbers, the dead branches, dead leaves off of zucchini plants. I mean, you're just promoting better airflow, allowing your plants to grow better. So I do kind of a modified version of vertical gardening, square foot gardening. So I grow everything vertically, but I am growing them very closely together. So anything that I can trellis gets trellised.
Wow. Yeah, you've got a lot of trellising going on there.
Yes, and so I used a lot of recycled materials that we just had lying around the house to make a tomato trellis. And that has been a complete game changer. I am able to grow 50 different types of tomatoes in 4 garden beds. I mean, it is absolutely phenomenal. And I just need to make sure that I trellis them as they're growing, and then it helps keep them off the ground. It helps keep them away from pests. It makes harvesting easier. It's just a really cool way to grow tomatoes. So my tomato plants can sometimes get upwards of 13 feet tall. I mean, they are just
Do
huge.
tomatoes like maybe prefer trellising? It's a better way to grow them.
I think so. In my experience, they have. Everybody has their own thoughts, and nobody's wrong about gardening.
Yeah.
You can do it a million different ways, and depending on where you are and how long your growing season is, like there's so many different ways to do it.
Oh, speaking of growing seasons, I want to shout out some people in the chat. We got people from Michigan, we have Southern California, Wisconsin, and Knoxville. So
cool.
Question about that, just from me, because I don't know anything about gardening. I assume there's different rules about what you can and can't plant in different areas. You mentioned something about zoning earlier on. Can you talk about what that means? Or
Yep, so there's different hardiness zones based on where you are in the country, and that mostly matters for how long your growing season is. It will depend on like your frost date, your last frost date, your first frost date. So basically here in Minnesota, we have a little bit of a shorter growing season, zone 4B. Again, I think it might have changed, but we can start planting. The safe time to start planting outside is normally Mother's Day weekend. Some people say Memorial Day. And then your plants are pretty much done by your first frost date, which is like mid-October. Sometimes we get lucky and we have a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But a lot of times the growing zone matters specifically for perennials.
Oh, yeah.
So plants that come back.
They're repeating. Yeah.
Yep. And so almost all of my veggies, other than some herbs, are not perennials. I have to plant them every year.
Yep.
Whereas some other areas may be able to overwinter their peppers out in the garden, just might have things, they just can grow longer. So here, a lot of people will grow determinate tomato varieties because the growing season is so short. They kind of have a determined amount of fruit that comes from them. I specifically like growing indeterminate varieties because, again, I trellis them. Yeah. And there's just some really cool, unique varieties out there that you can grow. So,
what kind of tomatoes are those? I'm just curious.
So, my favorite one is Barry's Crazy Cherry Tomato. So it grows.
It's a fun name too.
They're so fun. It grows like a bunch of grapes, and they're like little yellow tomatoes with like an oval shape, but like little pointy butts, and they're so good. And
they sound delicious.
I love tomatoes. They're delicious.
So, yeah.
So, and then like there's the San Marzano tomato. It's a Roma
those
variety.
Are so good.
They're so good. And so they're great for sauces and soups and just phenomenal. They're less acidic than a Roma tomato, and they produce more.
Sweeter. Yeah.
They're
delicious.
And that's the benefit of growing your own plants from seed as well. I'm able to grow all these different varieties because you might not be able to find them at a box store, but it's really fun. Or there's another one, the spoon tomato.
Spoon tomato?
It's real small, and you can fit like 8 of them on a spoon.
Oh, they're like little bite size.
They're so good.
Get a bunch of those. Probably really good for salads and different things.
They are
like
super.
That.
The kids love them. It's so fun. So if you're growing vertically, or I guess we were talking about zones. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I distracted you there, but we can definitely go back to vertical gardening here.
Yeah.
Tell us more about maybe what grows best in vertical gardening, or like what you prefer to choose as your veggies for vertical gardening.
So I, again, try to grow everything vertically as much as I can. So
for you, all gardening is
a lot of
really.
It. Yeah. I have a bunch of cattle panel trellises, and that's where I grow my cucumbers, my squash. I grow some vertical. There's some zucchinis that do well growing over trellising like that. Like the Tromboncino zucchini. I love the Tromboncino. It is such a neat variety. It's an Italian heirloom zucchini, and it grows beautifully. It's like 25-foot long vines. And
wow.
Growing these veggies over the trellising means you don't have to deal with the ground, the leaves getting stomped on the ground, you know, for the kids in the garden, dogs in the garden. Yep. It helps keep pests away. It helps keep the leaves nice and clean. So that's the Tromboncino there. And so they start off really tiny, and then they grow to be like 4 feet long. Cool. I entered one in the state fair last year.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Did it win?
No. I have some feelings about that. But
it was rigged.
It ended up being based on weight and not length.
The quality of the vegetable.
Yeah, maybe? That too. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was an experience for sure, but it's kind of fun. So that's hand pollinating the Tromboncinos, and
do you do a lot of hand pollinating on your own?
Yep. As we're progressing in our current world, we are seeing less pollinators, which is super unfortunate.
Yeah.
So plant native plants if you can. Save your pollinators. Don't use pesticides. Like, that's a big deal. But you can help your plants out by hand pollinating. You can hand pollinate zucchini. You can hand pollinate cucumbers. It's a bit tougher, but tomatoes you can help by just like jiggling the little flowers, or I take an electric toothbrush.
Yeah, I was gonna say I saw that on your social media.
Yeah,
using a toothbrush to pollinate your plants. Yeah,
it's actually pretty easy. It seems kind of silly, and I use a designated toothbrush for it.
You're not brushing with that toothbrush.
No, literally just vibrating the leaves of the plant is what the wings of the bees do, and that's how the pollen spreads. And you can grow tomatoes indoors that way as well. As long as they're being pollinated in some way, you can grow food indoors in the winter, which is great for Minnesota because we
like fresh vegetables and we do not have the climate for it all the time.
Yes, exactly. So.
I have a few questions in the chat here, so I'm going to read these off. This might kind of transfer into this one. Becca says, I just acquired a few planters with basil, tomatoes, and peppers, all in separate planters, not in one. And she says, I have no idea what I'm doing. My dad told me to water once the soil is no longer wet, and that's all about I know. Any tips?
Yep, so peppers and tomatoes, give them a stake early on, whether or not you're going vertically. If you're giving your plant something to attach the stem to, even just a stick works. You don't have to buy anything special for it. It's basically telling the plant to put energy into growing roots instead of holding itself upright.
Oh.
And then the other thing is, until the plant is somewhat established, the first few flowers you see, you want to pinch those off because you don't want to grow fruit. You want to let your plants establish their roots as best they can. Peppers you want to stake as well, especially with wind. I mean, we live right off of a lake, and
it is pretty windy here. We're a plains state, so we get a lot of wind.
Yes, they can. They definitely need that. Peppers like heat, so peppers typically. I guess I don't know if they're spicy peppers or sweet peppers.
It doesn't specify,
but they typically like heat. That's how you get your hot peppers and stuff like that. So it could be a little bit depending on where you are. My peppers are growing. They're only about this tall right now, but they eventually will take off and do very well. And the same thing with peppers, pinch off those first fruits you see. You need the plant to establish a good root system before, you know. One thing that helps with peppers and tomatoes specifically is mulching your soil.
Oh.
I like to use a cedar mulch because it deters bad bugs and it smells nice. But yeah, water your plants, mulch your soil. That'll keep your soil wet. Tomatoes like to be a little dry in between watering, so yeah, if you can stick your finger down in the dirt, and if you're like the top 2 inches comes out dry, then they could get watered again. And if you have them in pots, which it sounds like
they are in pots,
you're going to want to make sure that soil does not dry out, and you want to make sure you have good drainage. So there's a lot of things to think about, but nature finds a way. Like, nature always finds a way.
When you talk about drainage, I've heard this, and so I don't know anything about gardening. I'm just providing some extra commentary here, but I've heard people put maybe rocks at the bottom of their planters, or like just to lift the soil up from the bottom. Does that have any weight or merit?
Yeah, that definitely works. With outdoor planters, it's not entirely necessary. If you have, if there is holes in the planter, at least you don't necessarily need to do that. That's good for houseplants though, for sure. Like houseplants definitely need a good bit of
yes, a little something under there.
Yeah. exactly.
All right, I have a few more comments. They're coming in hot and fast. One more housekeeping item that I forgot to mention in the comments as well, or right above the comments. We've been seeing a lot of great clips from Emily's social media. You can follow her socials with the links that are provided there, so make sure to go check her out and see more great gardening videos. We got a question from Laura who says, did you start your seeds indoors?
I did. So I, in the beginning, started growing in very cheap plastic greenhouses and just kind of expanded from there. It's very, very cost effective to do it that way. You can do it on just a sunny windowsill, but they're like 50 bucks on Amazon and you can reuse them every year. My kids and my cats can't get in them. From there I went kind of nuts and expanded to have like 12 different greenhouses in my house.
Oh, wow.
So my whole family, I mean, the whole house is a greenhouse from February to May.
Yes, makes sense.
So I started about 150 different varieties of tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, zucchinis, and then about 20 of each. So there's nearly 1,000 seedlings in my house at one point this year, and then ended up selling a bunch of them and donating a bunch of them to community gardens, and then planting them in my garden. So
cool.
I got a good head start on the growing season that way. My sweet peppers are already producing fruit right now.
Wow.
It's kind of nuts. My 5-year-old Wesley ate his first banana pepper from the plant this week.
Did he enjoy it, or
he
was
did.
it a
He loves it. He keeps asking every single day, is there another one, is there another one?
And good thing your garden is big, so then they can go and not take all of the peppers.
They also know where the spicy peppers are, so they leave those beds alone.
Yep.
At some point, I think our 3-year-old Brody is probably going to have an
experiment with one of the spicy peppers.
Yeah. When we're growing some of the spiciest peppers in the world in the garden. So
what are you growing? What's the spicy pepper?
The spiciest pepper in the world is the Carolina Reaper.
Oh, so you got some Reapers in there.
We have some Reapers in there. I have a chocolate Reaper, but I also have some other funky varieties. The Primatali pepper is, we think, the new spiciest pepper, but it hasn't quite reached Carolina Reaper levels, but my husband and his best friend Josh, they will taste test my peppers. So I don't eat anything spicy.
You just grow them.
I just grow them and take pictures of them. But yeah, so they'll taste them, and so they claim that the Primatali pepper is spicier, but for a shorter period of time.
Okay. Doesn't last as long.
It doesn't last as long. So they are definitely in pain. Lots of crying and hiccuping.
But they're choosing to do it. So
they are.
The taste
yeah,
testers.
I mean, a little bit of peer pressure from me, but
they're sacrificing for the art of the garden.
Yes. Yep. But yeah, so it's definitely start your own stuff, because you can do those cool varieties. You know, there's a lot of plants out there. There's so many, and there's like so many different types of tomatoes too. Like the Rebel Starfighter tomato.
They all have such fun names too. I feel like they name tomatoes really fun stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be a fun job to have.
Tomato namer. Yeah. I'm gonna look for those opportunities. All right, we got some more questions coming in here. How do you, you grow a lot in your square foot gardening. Do you ever have issues with overcrowding, or do you handle overcrowding problems in your garden?
So I am pretty meticulous about planting things. I don't really follow what the seed packets say and that. I'm very good about, ask my friends and they'll tell you I'm not good about weeding, but I have been trying to weed more. But I just really heavily prune my plants. So I am making sure that everything has good airflow. Once the plants are established, I'll trim, like for example, tomato plants, you can trim the bottom foot up, all the branches off basically, and you're basically just saying like, okay, like this is nice, some nice airflow here, I'll trim the sucker branches. And again, growing vertically means you have so much more space to work with.
Yeah.
Your plants are not moving out laterally, they're growing upwards, so you have more room to put more things.
Yeah.
And along those lines, companion planting, you can plant marigolds with your all kinds of plants, and that will keep bugs from getting in there, and it attracts the beneficial pollinators. And you can plant basil by your tomatoes, and so you're basically using all of the space you have. Again, you just need to make sure you're feeding your soil. So, and there's nothing wrong with just trying something too. I mean, if you have a packet of seeds, sprinkle them in your bed, and if they grow, they grow.
Just see what happens.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see it happen. Nature is wild. It's like, it's so cool, especially like peas and beans. Yeah. You can sprinkle a packet in and they just sprout and they take off.
Wow.
And if they have somewhere to grow, you can grow a ton of them in a little space. It's pretty cool.
Cool. All right, we got some more questions in here. I think you did mention that you built your raised garden beds yourself. Somebody asked, how did you build them? You said you put them together pretty simply on your own.
Yeah, they're super easy. So I took 2x6s, and sometimes I'd use 2x10s and 2x12s, and essentially just made rectangles with them. Put two deck screws in the end on each corner, and then I took an L bracket on the inside of each bed and put those in. And so I've had no problems growing with them this way. They last for years and years. You can put landscape fabric at the bottom of them if you want to. I don't always do that. I like to let the worms come up and get into the garden and let there be good drainage. So I try not to do that as much. But if you're in a spot where you have a ton of weeds or you want to deal with that, then it's not a problem to do that. You just got to make sure you're putting good stuff in your soil and filling them up. But I mean, each bed took like 20 minutes to make.
Super simple. Yeah.
They're so easy. And we don't stain our garden beds. We don't want the stain to leach into our food, so we're not doing anything like that. Very easy to do. You can even take like fence panels and use like fence pickets to make garden beds with. Like very easy to do. You don't need to do anything special, anything expensive. Just grow
that
something.
Container. Yeah. And if you want more detailed instructions, if you look below the chat, there is a banner to download a bundle that we have some planting tips and then more in-depth instructions on how to build your own garden bed, along with another vertical planter idea and some more in-depth plans for a smaller but more detailed woodworking planter. So check that out below the chat. Are you fine with me running with some more questions here? We got them coming in the chat.
Yeah. One thing as well too, if you're not sure you're gonna like gardening, if you don't want to commit to a whole huge garden bed, grow bags are a super good way to go about growing.
Kind of test it out.
They're basically it's basically a pot, but it's felt. It's got handles so you can move it around. And I have a buddy my friend Josh, who grows everything he grows in grow bags, and they do amazing. Wow. You just, like, potatoes do well in there. You just got to make sure your soil doesn't dry out as much, but he's able to move his bags around to follow the sun when he needs to, depending on.
Super handy.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And then you're not committing to a whole huge garden space. You can see if you like it first, and go from there. So a lot of people will even implement those in with their existing garden to use plants and put them in walkways or on patios. And like, you don't need a lot of space. You can grow a lot of food in a very little area.
Work with what you got.
Yeah.
All right. What did you do, or what did you use to create your tomato cages? Or I guess the trellis material?
So my tomato plants, I start with a very, like about a 5-foot long little stick post type thing. I don't even know what they're called. And I wrap twine around the bottom, and then I tape it with some tape, and then I wrap that around my tomato plant all the way up the main stem, and then I string it up and over the trellis. And the trellis
you're stringing it yourself in there.
Yep. And then as the plant grows, I can just wind it around the twine. For the actual trellis itself, I just used 2x4s that I had lying around.
Yeah.
And I just attached them to my garden beds and then put a couple horizontal beams across it. I mean, the whole process took me a couple hours. And if you start early on with your plants, it's not a huge mess to deal with trying to figure out which plant is which. And then you just got to make sure you're cutting off the weird long branches that grow, because there's some like sucker branches aren't going to produce a ton of fruit. So they're
not benefiting the plant really necessarily.
No. Yeah. So just any kind of structure that you can hold weight on will work for that to grow your tomatoes up and over. So, and people use cattle panels for that as well. You just have to attach your tomato plant to the cattle panel because they don't have vines.
Yeah.
But it's super easy and very inexpensive to do that.
Yeah, sounds like it's like very simple to put together.
Yeah.
So that's super cool. Okay, we got more questions in here. What are the best plants to start out for a beginner gardener? Maybe specifically vegetables, since that's your specialty. If someone knew nothing, what would you recommend they plant?
I would start with a couple tomatoes, a couple sweet peppers, maybe a spicy pepper, but like a jalapeno or a poblano, nothing too crazy.
Yeah.
And I mean, really, once they're established and you gotta make sure your soil's good. You can get your soil tested, by the way. That's a good thing to know. You can take soil samples and send them into a lot of colleges. Will test them.
Oh,
There's
really?
places on the internet. Yeah,
That's a great resource. Get your soil tested for free.
absolutely.
Or maybe you have to pay for it.
I'm not sure if you have to pay or not.
I'm not advocating. I don't know if it's free or not.
I'm not sure, but yeah, it's a really good way to know what you need in there, because sometimes your soil can be depleted. It could need nitrogen. It could, all kinds of stuff. So, but yeah, start with some tomatoes. Start with some peppers. Root veggies are good too. Turnips, potatoes, carrots, that sort of thing. A foolproof plant, peas and beans. They're so easy to grow.
Are they?
They're extremely easy to grow. And beans feed your soil. They're actually a good plant to grow around other plants. And you can grow, like they're great for kids. They're great for drying and saving. They're great for snacking right away. But yeah,
beans.
Start with those guys. Mint. Mint is
that's good to know. I'm actually interested in growing mint, so I like hearing that it
if you grow mint,
easy to grow.
If you grow mint, put it in a pot.
That was what I was gonna do, so I feel like I'm really on track here.
So mint's fairly invasive. It's great for bees. It's extremely great for bees.
Love to hear that.
I planted one mint plant 5 years ago when I knew nothing about gardening in one of my beds. And now I have a whole mint forest, which is not ideal. It
smells great.
It smells amazing. I have been giving mint to the chickens, been giving mint to friends and family for already a few weeks now. We use it for all kinds of stuff. But yeah, it's very easy to grow. You can grow that in your house as well. Like, that's super easy. But put it in a pot, please, so that it doesn't expand everywhere.
The mint,
Contain the mint.
All right, some great tips there. Let's see. This question, I've never heard of this, so I'm curious to hear what you say. What do you think of mixing coconut coir, I think that's what, C-O-I-R, with store-bought raised planter mix or native soil?
So coco coir, it's good. You might not need to if you're using store-bought soil. It's just making your soil a little bit more airy.
Okay.
It's good for like things that need their roots to grow nice and so I use coco coir when I start my seedlings. I'll use that. It's nice because it comes in like a real tight block, so it's easy to store. And you can use that for microgreens as well. I don't see a problem with it. There's a lot of people that don't like it because it's not adding nutrients. It's just creating airier soil.
Kind of,
But if your dirt's really compact, it's really good for that. It's not like super cheap, so I don't know if you necessarily need to. Most raised bed planter mixes already have something like that in there, so it's not entirely necessary. But if you're noticing your soil is getting real hard, real compact, you can put that in there. You can mix it up. Carrots are also good for growing in helping break up soil. Just because they grow down, they can expand. I mean, they will grow a little tighter and look kind of silly, but yeah, it works.
It's an option.
It works great for seed starting.
This is kind of in the same vein, or maybe not. I feel like I'm saying things that are gardening opinions, and I don't know anything about gardening, so I should not be throwing that information in there. But what kind of fertilizer do you use for containers, or do you recommend for containers?
So the only fertilizer that I use, I use worm castings, but the only fertilizer I use is Neptune's Harvest. It works amazing. It stinks. I actually just did it today. The whole backyard stinks, and if your dogs get into it, it's a whole mess. So my dogs broke the bottle last year, and our whole driveway smelled like fish for months.
Gosh.
It was so bad. But yeah, Neptune's Harvest works really well. They have 3 different types. They have like a flower one, they have a fish and seaweed one, and then they have a veggie one. And I like the fish and seaweed one best.
Oh, really?
It does stink, but if you keep your dogs out of your garden and don't touch the fertilizer, it works really well. And it's a concentrate, so you mix it with water. So I buy a gallon every year, and it normally lasts me through the whole growing season.
Wow.
And it just has like a very good ratio of all the things your plants need. So it works for raised beds, it works for container gardening, it works for all kinds of stuff.
Can people get that on Amazon, or do you have to go to a specific gardening store?
Amazon has it. They have it in gallon sizes. They have it in smaller sizes as well.
If you want to test it out.
Yeah, it stinks though. Please don't spill it.
Test out the smell, maybe first get a smaller one. All right, we got lots of questions in the chat here. This one I think we were talking about before we started as well. How do you prevent rabbits from eating plants in your garden or other invasive kind of little munchers coming for the veggies?
So we have 2 very big dogs. We have an Alaskan Malamute and a Lab Rottweiler mix.
Oh.
So every single day, normally in the night, I let them free into the garden and they kind of spread their smell and then hunt up any rabbits that are in there. And that typically helps. The chickens, the rabbits don't really like the chickens, or they don't really like the chickens either. I try not to do any pesticides if I can, any like deterrents like that. Everything is fenced in our garden as well. We did find a whole family of baby bunnies in our garden this year.
I heard the bunnies are like going crazy this year. There's a higher population of bunnies.
It's a very crazy year with the warm weather we're having.
Yeah.
Like we're seeing all kinds of new crazy things. So yeah, they were already in the stage where they could be away from their mom, and I don't know where their mom was. Yeah, I was weeding the garden and I grabbed one and I was like,
my gosh.
and I was like, I yelled for my husband. I held them, because the dogs were in the yard.
Yeah.
Like, please don't eat these in front of my children. But yeah, so we relocated those guys, and so they come in the garden. There's enough plants out there that things are going to get eaten no matter what you do.
Yeah.
You can, again, growing vertically.
I was just going to say that's the benefit of the vertical gardening, isn't it?
Huge benefit. Yeah. And like, for example, tomatoes and peppers, if you're trimming up those bottom leaves, the rabbits aren't really going to go for the stems. Like they can if they want to, but like they're not looking for that sort of thing. Sometimes people will plant like crops like that the rabbits can eat.
Like one specifically for them?
Yeah. Just what do you call it?
Kind of like a
like
ruse.
giveaways.
Yeah, something. Yeah, freebies for the rabbits so they don't get to the important plants.
Yep. Some people will use like pepper powder to try to stop them, but that's more harm than it's worth, I think, if your hands get it, if you rub it on your eyes and stuff like that. So
cool. Lots of ideas there. All right, we got more questions in here. Lots of stuff. People are super interested in the gardening, so I'd love to see that. What advice do you have for best supporting tomatoes through the hotter, drier months?
So mulching is going to help with that. Unfortunately, we all go through that. Make sure you're watering them regularly, but not it basically just like I water my tomatoes every 2 days when it gets super hot. If it's super, super hot and I need to water them every day and possibly twice a day, I'll do that. But having mulch on your beds can help quite a bit with that sort of thing. And also if you're planting basil underneath your tomato plants, that's keeping your soil nice and moist as well. Anything that provides shade can help. But tomatoes need a little bit of heat and the dryness to help ripen, so it's not a terrible thing. And we can't control the weather either. So
just got to give them a little extra care.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, maybe this is the same answer as the bunny one, but would you say keeping squirrels out of your garden beds is any different than bunnies? We got some questions on keeping squirrels away. They're a little more aggressive, I'd say.
They are. So one thing that squirrels do, and this is the reason I start all of my seeds inside, even my peas and beans for the most part, is that they'll move seeds around in the garden.
Just shuffling around in there.
Yeah, specifically ground cherries. We grow a lot of ground cherries, and there's ground cherries in every single one of my garden beds now because of the chipmunks. So not ideal, but we're out there all day long with the kids, and the squirrels don't like being around the kids, and they don't like being around the dogs, so that helps. But yeah, you can cage your stuff if you want. There's people that will use netting, but they find a way. You know, and just keep an eye on it, because you're able to succession plant if you need to. You can continue planting if things get torn or eaten, depending on the season. So,
do what you can.
Do what you can. We try not to trap them or kill them or whatever, but we have a lot of nature in the back, and it happens.
Okay, a few more questions in here. How do you avoid mildew?
So, if you're I think it's not as much a question of if it'll happen, it's more a question of when it'll happen. Most people who grow squash specifically, I've never had mildew on my tomatoes or my peppers. I only ever get it on my squash and zucchini, and it's way later on in the season. But growing vertically, so like I'll grow my zucchini up a T-post. Any mildew spores, mold spores, or anything like that that's in the dirt is not going to get on my plants because I'm watering just at the base of the plant. And then I'm cutting off all the lower leaves of the plant to promote that airflow and promote them not being wet. So a big thing is bottom watering, water from the bottom. Try not to get the leaves wet. Obviously you can't do that with rain.
Yeah.
But if you're trimming, if you're pruning the plant from the bottom up, you're gonna have a better chance of the dirt not spraying it. And then if you do get a plant like that, I've heard of some people, like with powdery mildew, I've heard of some people cleaning their plant off with milk, which I haven't tried yet, but that would be cool to see if it worked. But get rid of those leaves. Don't put them in your compost bin because you don't want to spread that mildew. But yeah, cut those leaves, get rid of them. Clean your tools you're using to cut and your gloves that you're handling them with to not spread it. But oftentimes when like you're nearing the end of the plant's life, you're going to get that powdery mildew. Unfortunately, it's kind of a...
Just got to learn to deal with it.
Yeah.
Okay. What is a cattle panel?
A cattle panel is a 16-foot long, like super heavy-duty metal fencing that I believe they use for cows. There's hog panels as well, but they're a little bit thinner. And so they're 16 feet long, so that's the perfect width to put over a 3-foot walkway between beds. They're super sturdy. You can attach them to a metal T-post, and they'll stay for years in your garden. They hold up pumpkins and watermelons. I mean,
they're sturdy.
So sturdy. My kids climb on them. They're great.
If they were meant for cows, they got to be sturdy.
Exactly.
That is what they truly were for.
And they have like squares all through them, so perfect for your vines to climb up. Very easy to reach your hands through to harvest things. I mean, that's one of the best parts about vertical gardening is you can harvest so easily. You can see everything that needs to be harvested, so you literally just stick your hands in and yeah, it's pretty cool. So the annoying thing about them is they don't fold and they don't roll. So
it's hard to transport then, I'd assume.
Yeah, we had to rent moving trucks to get those.
Gosh.
So
she's dedicated.
Yeah, I mean, it was worth it. It's worth it to have that growing space and not have to build a trellis. It was pretty nice.
Cool.
And they look cool. So it makes those cool arched pathways. So if you saw in the videos, there's
they look super cute. It gives like such a nice vibe to the garden, I feel like. It really does.
Yep, and then I'll put some of those horizontally behind some garden beds, like behind the fence. And that's where I'll grow my peas and beans and that kind of thing. So just kind of maximizing our space.
Cool. Another great option for vertical gardening.
Yeah.
All right, we've gotten through a large chunk of the questions here. Let me just breeze through. One comment here, let's see if you agree with this one as well. If you have a cat, catnip is in the mint family and is easy to grow as well. Have you ever grown catnip before?
Yep, and that's one that comes back every year too. Again, ideal to put that in a pot so it's not spreading everywhere.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, super easy to grow. You can use all that kind of stuff for teas as well if you want to save it and dry it. Yeah, my favorite is apple mint. You get those big soft leaves. You slap them, put them in a cocktail. Like they're so good.
Oh, muddle them,
so
make a nice little mojito or something.
We'll make like watermelon mint juice for the kids. Like they love it.
Cool. All right, I got 2 more questions here for you. First one is, what is the best soil or your soil choice for inside plants? Do you grow many inside plants, or well, I suppose you did all of your seeding inside. So
yes, yeah. Well, depending on what you're growing. I recently heard of a company and got to try out some of their products. Sol Soils.
Sol Soil? How do you spell that?
Sol Soils, S-O-L. They're local to Crystal, Minnesota. And they have specific soils for monstera plants, specific cactus soils, specific soils for lilies. I mean, they are so cool.
Yeah.
For let's see, what else? Indoor gardening. If you're doing it for seed starting, I like to use a mixture of coco coir, vermiculite, and perlite with a little bit of compost. That kind of makes a very good potion of soils for your seedlings to grow. But yeah, I think Sol Soils is probably my favorite for indoor growing, specifically because they come dry. So you're not going to get fungus gnats or plant gnats or any bugs like that. You got to rehydrate it. But I planted a monstera in one of them, and I haven't had to water it in 2 weeks.
Wow.
Which is great right now with us being so warm.
You're busy with the outside garden too.
Yeah, I know. My plants are, they're a little sad inside right now. But yeah, check them out. Sol Soils. They're a cool variety. All
right. Well, we keep getting questions in here, so I'll ask a few more, and then I'll let you wrap up with any other comments you want to provide or information you want to give us about vertical gardening. But one question about pests. People have recommended to use neem oil on pests in gardens. Someone is asking, Lisa, should I use it right out of the bottle or do you need to dilute neem oil? Have you used neem oil?
Yep, it depends on the type you're getting, and it should say on the bottle. So
Okay.
I've used it both ways. I've bought it. I like the concentrates better because you're using less plastic that way, and that you need to dilute. If you're buying a neem oil that says, it should say on the bottle if it's ready to spray. It'll say concentrate if you need to dilute it, if not. But neem oil is a great option for pests in the garden. It's natural. I think it kind of stinks a little bit, but it works very well for bugs. Specifically, cucumber beetles do not like neem oil. There's another clove oil, a company called Bugzooka makes it.
Bugzooka.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
And that's a concentrate as well. And it's similar to neem oil, all natural ingredients, but the bugs just don't like it. And it works really well, and you can eat your veggies right off the plant without washing them even with it. So it's not even a pesticide.
Super
It's
nice.
Yeah, it's very cool. But yeah, you just have to check the bottle, and if it says concentrate, you need to mix water, but it'll definitely tell you. And yeah, definitely look for concentrates though, because you can save on your plastic usage that way.
Yeah.
So.
All right, one more question for you here, and then I'll let you do some final comments or any other information you want to give us. And the question is, do tomatoes need direct sunlight all summer long? There's an area where I've tried in my garden that gets full sun, so it's just super hot, and I think they get burnt there.
It kind of depends. Mine get direct sun, but we're in Minnesota, so we have times most of the year where it's not super, super hot. I think they're typically a direct sun. I believe they're like a 6 to 8 hours of sunlight a day.
So they like a lot of sun.
They like a lot of sun, but keeping the ground near them shaded should help. And sometimes you'll just need to prune off those burnt ends, unfortunately, depending on where you are.
If it happens, it happens.
Yeah. One thing with pruning tomatoes is try not to prune any leaves over your fruit. You want the fruit to be shaded if you can.
Oh.
The leaves, you don't need them. I mean, they're sacrificial. But when they're shading the fruit, that's fine. Keep those ones, and never take off more than 25% of the plant at a time. So if you're cutting off those burnt leaves, just make sure you're not pruning too much because you don't want to shock the plant.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily matter if the leaves are getting burnt as long as your fruit is still growing and it's shaded. So.
Cool. I lied. I have one more question from Shelly. Shelly just asked this question too. I want to make sure you got all your questions answered. And the last one is, should you add Miracle-Gro to plants, and how often? Some people are big proponents of Miracle-Gro, but that doesn't necessarily mean.
It's kind of a iffy thing in the gardening world. I don't have a problem with Miracle-Gro soil. I only use the Omni certified stuff that's organic if I'm going to use it. But I don't use Miracle-Gro fertilizers specifically because Neptune's Harvest is just so much better.
Super great, yeah.
With that kind of thing, it's pay the extra money and get a very good product that's going to be better for you and your family in the long run. And that sort of thing you can put on every 2 weeks. Yeah. It's great. It's amazing. Miracle-Gro soil, I don't have any problems with it, but personally I don't use any Miracle-Gro fertilizers. Neptune's Harvest, it's honestly the best bang for your buck. It makes huge plants. My pepper plants get 5 feet tall every year.
Wow.
Like, it works.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for all the questions and being interested in our Growing Your Own Food Live. Emily, please let us, what other information would you like to share with us? Is there anything that we missed that you'd like to go over, or let the viewers know about vertical gardening, square foot gardening, vegetables in general?
One interesting thing that I have been trying to look more into, and maybe I'll do some more videos, so keep an eye out for that on my social media, is vermicomposting, to add nutrients and make your soil healthy. So it's essentially like adding worm composting right into your garden bed. So you can take like a dollar store garbage can and stick it in your garden bed, and then you're putting in your food scraps, your brown waste, like all kinds of stuff like that. So like paper and leaves, and then the worms come and they eat it and they spread the nutrients throughout your plants.
Ooh.
So that's something I've been looking into doing.
Super eco-friendly, seems like.
Yeah, it's very eco-friendly. And then the other thing is just, it's never too late to start a garden. There's always things you can be growing, whether it's in your house or outside. So if you're sitting there and you see all these other people's gardens huge, already blooming, harvesting. Don't let that stop you from growing your own food. Like, it's super important that we learn to grow our own food, that we do this, that we teach our kids that you can grow your own food in a healthy, safe, pesticide-free way. And honestly, like, it's that simple.
Yeah.
Put a pack of beans in the ground.
Yeah.
Like, don't be afraid to get started. You don't need to do it huge. You can start small. Do what's manageable for you, and then expand it every year if you want. And it's very, very cool as a mom to be able to show my kids all that they can do this themselves.
Yeah.
You know, and my 5-year-old Wesley, he already knows which parts of the tomato you prune and what you don't prune, and
he's gonna be a pro.
Yeah, he's kind of bugging me lately. He says the cucumber beetles are his favorite bug, which there's no chance. I mean, you know,
you're like, no, they're not.
They're not. So, yeah, it's cool. Anybody can do it. You don't need a lot of space to do it. Grow food, not grass. Yeah,
and just get started.
Just
give
started.
it a try.
Get a pack of seeds. You know, go to the store and buy a plant if you haven't grown them. Do it on your patio. Do it on your countertop. You know, grow your own food.
Cool.
It's
very
huge.
rewarding. Well, thank you so much, Emily, for joining us. This was a great live, and please let us know in the comments, even after the live. You can watch this at any time if you're interested in more gardening videos, if you want to see more of this kind of content from Craftsy. And make sure underneath the chat again that you download our bundle that has 3 planter plans and some information on growing different vegetables, including beans, which you mentioned are super great for beginners. So download that. And last thing, check out Emily's socials in the description as well to see more videos of her beautiful garden. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.